I would say then let's get started. And yeah, if people still trickle in, that's perfectly fine. Also, since we're live in on LinkedIn, maybe we'll have people coming in and out. So for the session today, we'll have two parts. We will have from my side, where we go through kind of the tech stack that we see emerging for yeah, the promise here of shipping fast, but also learning fast. And in the second phase, we'll have Zain coming in, who has another. He will be joining halfway as he has another meeting overbooked that we couldn't move. He'll be joining on for the experimentation side. So we'll be looking at specifically in the context of experimentation, what how does that look like? So the first part, a bit more the theory, and then we'll go more concrete in the experimentation example. And yeah, as I mentioned, let's keep it interactive. If there's any thoughts, any things, always jump in, either in the chat or come off mute. So with that in mind, let's jump in. The why this topic. Yeah, I'll skip the who's Adasight part. Why this topic? For me, it came like we see a lot of lovable vibe coded products, a lot of things that are happening faster on the side of building. But oftentimes the aspect of learning about how those products are adopted, how yeah, like the learning aspect of that is falling kind of more of an afterthought. So that's kind of the area of the problem that we're gonna discuss. The framework is something I've been on the one side thinking about as well from our side, how we are operating at Adasight. I've been pretty heads down the last weeks, going into Claude in particular from my side, and I'm seeing connecting more and more the dots on the one side how we are operating, but I think also something that can be generalized in this context of building fast, but also learning fast. And then with that in mind, we'll then have the deep dive in the experimentation side, where I'll pass over to Zain, our squad leader for experimentation, who's running experimentation programs with our clients. So the first problem here is it's like oftentimes on the one side, I think many organizations have overcome the feature factory of just shipping faster. That's understood. We have to not just ship, but also learn and like build the right things. But still, like the optimization is often more on the action side, on like, hey, we want to launch new features, we want to run more experiments, we want to understand or like maybe interview more users. So the bias is oftentimes more towards the action. And then later there's the afterthought of okay, like let's learn, let's observe, and also let's file the things. So that's often comes more on the second side. So what we end up with oftentimes, and this is kind of the classic way, because this classic loop of we decide, we plan something, we build it. Nowadays we can build it faster. That's great. We can release it we can maybe have feature flagging as partial rollouts, things like this. Maybe release an experiment. We measure it, hopefully, with tracking of that new feature, and then have a dashboard to measure the impact, and then use that to decide something again, to then continue the loop. But this is pretty action orientated and action heavy, and that is partly probably because it's exciting to launch a new feature. It's exciting to launch an experiment, but then what happens afterwards is oftentimes a bit more of an afterthought. It's kind of like maybe there's already excitement for something new to ship and to take action on. So what I've been thinking about is to have the second side, and pardon the kind of scrappiness here. It's still kind of like an early thoughts, to have the second loop, which is the learning side. So you decide something, you do run through the action loop, but that this is not that you have basically a first-class citizen as the learning side, where you collect your learnings, synthesize them, structure them, and then have that as context. And that's something which I'm seeing, particularly when we're thinking about AI in the context of insights, analysis, also recommendations or personalization, that the context is key. We talked about in the past, particularly around prompting on AI and how the context matters for prompting. But now this is more and more shifting towards giving AI the right memory and the right context to work on things and to for any purpose that an AI has, maybe also an AI agent has, the context is key. And this is something I see here very connected to building something, shipping, measuring, and then filing it and collecting it and having that context that builds over time. So when you do run an analysis, maybe with AI agents, maybe with having it your Amplitude or whatever you're using in Slack to discuss things and then get to a decision, that this with each loop here compounds. And that's kind of the core idea. I think in the past, kind of pre-AI and pre-AI agents in particular, this whole collection process, cumbersome, oftentimes also like hard to maintain over time. It's very hard to actually compound, especially across different data points that you have your experiments over time. All the learnings are collected, but also ideally you have your user interviews structured, you have your OKRs structured. All these different data points are kind of scattered, but now we're actually seeing that it's more feasible to actually have those collected and as rich context. So wherever you're using AI to make better decisions, you can have that context. So that's kind of theory. We will not stick with the theory. So I want to be very hands-on in how we're using this and where I think my last 5 weekends went on like tinkering with this. So we'll go through these different steps here, step by step, how this looks in a concrete way. So let's jump for the decide aspect. Decide is like we're starting here, since we use it as a starting point. There's not too much going on. We just go with like a hypothesis. We have like a bet that we have, anything that triggers a new decision that we want to take action on. This might be a new feature, maybe a new maybe an experiment to learn, maybe a campaign that you launch, maybe also like an in-app guide or a survey that you launch. Important here that there is a rationale behind it. So that is kind of the first part of like the learning cycle, that you actually have a defined why are we taking this action, and not just kind of out of a hunch, but what is the hypothesis? Why are we thinking this might help us improve our the direction we're taking? So when we do have that, then the building side, this is just how we are approaching it now. So this is going to look different, whatever the tech stack is. From our side, we were moving from Webflow, where we had templates, and then obviously there was, as we were growing at Adasight, there was like growing pains with that template. So and it's also probably not as AI first. So what we did now is we moved to Vercel plus Astro. That's our kind of the tech stack for our simple marketing website. So that's where we're sitting. We're using Figma for where we design things and where we prepare what we want to release. Claude Code is helping translate that Figma file to Astro and Vercel, which then goes live after human review. We log all this in GitHub. So we have on the one side the code repository in GitHub, but also what we automatically do is we have the documentation of that release. So if we have, for example, a new landing page that goes live for a service offering, for example, we have in Notion. Actually, Notion would probably also be here in that regard. There would be, okay, that's the service documentation. We have now this landing page that should be promoting it. And then this also goes into GitHub, this rationale as well. So we see already here baked into simply the step of deciding and building, we're already building that context layer on the side with fairly reasonable human touch. So there's a lot of documentation that AI can simply help us to not only act faster, but actually learn faster with that context in mind. And then tracking implementation, of course, also something in the build phase. So when we do ship, we have clarity on when we ship it, what also to which audience are we releasing this to. Something, for example, if you have Amplitude in place, you might want to think about logging that release date, either as version control or like as a particular date, as an annotation in the charts. So that's something to do. Otherwise, this concept is not too engineering heavy, or the audience is not necessarily engineering heavy. So the shipping part, probably a lot more to it, especially in a more complex product. But from a learning and learning side, we'll keep it at that. The measure side, if you might have Amplitude here for tracking events and also tracking the release itself. If you have an experimentation tool, definitely you'd want to make sure that on the one side the data is reliable early on, and to tweak it if there's anything off before like waiting and then seeing that it's not. But we'll go into that in a more deep dive in the second part of the experimentation section. So key being here to measure things and to start collecting data. We will then skip the decide part because there's not a decision to make, but we will go into the collecting side. So this, I think, is kind of maybe the heart of the whole flow here, where we collect the data points on the one side on the quantitative side. So anything we measure from the act loop here is something we capture. But also we would be thinking here about session replays, any kind of quantitative things, maybe heat maps, maybe any kind of feedback or also support tickets that were sent from that experience and related to that experience. Something I see very relevant here as well is to have a foundational context ready. So I'm thinking here about company context, about what does your company do, but also more nuanced on like how, what's your positioning in the market, what is your target audience, what's your the demographic of your ICPs, where are you currently standing on your product life cycle, or like what's anything related to your product itself. Because then with all that context in mind, any analysis around the release you did and actually acting on something is far richer and far more relevant, let's say, especially if in the analyze phase you use AI. So thinking about if you just using Amplitude again as example, a tool like Amplitude can also allow you to add context within the platform. So there's this AI context, but what we're doing here is a lot, and which kind of was a bit of a game changer for me with Claude Code, is the combination of GitHub. Just going to jump here quickly into what we're using. So I have here this Adasight brain, where we have on the one side the different agents that are coming into play. So yeah, different agents that are having different roles. They're then documented here on what they will be doing. You see also here this knowledge steward. So that's kind of our friend here who is exclusively responsible for filing everything and bringing things where they should be going. And on the other side, we have here the memory of things that are relevant for the company, our metrics tree, any kind of experiments we've launched in the past. And then things here like projects, references, etc., or overall strategy. So this is like context that was built now, like over for me, like the five weekends, just like hacking things together. But this is something where once you have initial foundation in place, you can then have these compound learnings over time. And with each release, each kind of these acting loops, you can then add more layers to it that then allows to really have this knowledge compound. But also if we go to the next stage here, the analysis has far more context, or like with that additional context, it's far more relevant as well. So if you think about having an AI agent that helps you interpret the effect or the success of a new release, maybe there's a big feature that has been released, a lot of anticipation. If we think about the steps so far, we'll have clear rationale why this feature is being built and what our expectations are. We will probably think about how does that bring us forward on our OKR goals, on our business objective. We build it. We have a documentation of how it is built, who it is released to, when it is released. We have our data points that are measured as kind of the reality check of all this. And then we file it, combine it, and very importantly, structure it with all the other contexts we have. And then we can, with all these points, we can then, together with AI especially, get a lot of like good recommendations and good insights and observations. Also, what I always like to do is, in my case with Claude, but like this is true for the other common platforms as well, to be critically candid. So it's always when releasing something, it's always a bit of like, oh, this is my baby, my something where you're obviously excited for, and where like the more you work on it, the more bias comes. So to be critically candid can also be a great use case for analyzing the impact of things. So that's kind of the analyze phase, and then
Hey, Gregor,
yeah,
we
and
have a
then
question from
yes.
Marion. Real
Mhm.
quick. Instead of creating agents, you could have just created skills in Claude Code.
Yes, that's possible. Yeah, so the way I'm seeing this is we have the brain, which has multiple agents, and each agent has their description, but then also I do also have in Claude different skills that are coming in when they are helpful. You could definitely for the analyze phase say use this skill specifically for each feature release. Definitely possible. Um, yeah, it's definitely possible. You could do that. I think for my setup, I'm looking at basically using multiple agents to have more spectrum in like what like if there's, for example, an experiment being run, it's going to be a bit different. If a new feature is released, going to be a bit different. If we have like an ad campaign and we want to see the effect, again a bit different. So the skill would have to be specific for that job. So that would be the only caveat to it. If you have an agent who you say where you say be my sparring partner as analytics partner, or like growth advisor, and coach me, or like work with me on these different releases, whatever you want to take as angle. That agent would have multiple skills at their disposal, and then you can have, for example, for the experimentation side, the skill of like how you want to have an experiment analyzed and interpreted and filed, and which kind of structure you want it to give. So that would definitely be something to tap into. But you could then also say if you have on the act side something different, it would use a different skill. So definitely relevant, and something you should consider in this setup is being precise about the skills. I It depends on how open you want to have this loop, if you also need an agent additional to the skills. But great point. Is there a follow-up question on it? I don't see the chat. If it is so, do jump in or also come off mute. If not, I'll assume it was a helpful answer, I hope. Cool. Then with that, let's jump to the last part here, the decision logic. So what we're looking at here is when we went through our whole loop of taking action, we've documented the findings, we have analyzed if there's any insights we can take from, if there's any recommendations, especially actionable recommendations that we can distill from the analyze side. We want to have a fairly balanced, or we want to have not every recommendation is going to be actionable or good or fit into the overall strategy. So what we'll want to do here is in that decision logic, how do we balance the different pros and cons, and what's the weights of the different arguments? And that fills into as well into this context here, and that company context that we mentioned. For me, for example, in the setup, I like having our annual objectives and our OKRs in that GitHub brain, because it holds me accountable on when I have another idea, wake up, hey, like this or this could actually be something to take action on, or from this experiment, do we take this or that direction? If you have that persistent objective that you are working towards as organization, this decision logic can help you navigate that. And it can also bring across the team, it can bring objectivity in, that we say, okay, hey, we have agreed on this roadmap or these business objectives together with our findings that are well structured and objective. Obviously, not everything is 100% objective, but as objective as we can be, we get to this conclusion and then we take action on that from there. And with every loop that we're taking, the idea is to always revisit, is our decision logic and how we are balancing the different factors, is it still accurate, or should we revisit that? And do we focus more on, for example, revenue optimization, or do we focus more on, what are the different parameters? So with every loop, it's basically a reinforcing driver to make more accurate or more effective decisions, while acting and learning on the other side, and building a rich system for collecting context. Yeah. So just to recap, we went through the loop here of deciding something, whatever that trigger might be. It might be something on the side of simply a new release. Maybe it's a new observation. Maybe it's a new company objective, and there's a bet to strive further towards it. We then take that and potentially using AI where we have a Figma file, translate that with AI into code level, document it with GitHub, ship it, measure it with tracking. We file the results from it, and not only the results themselves, but we contextualize it with other data points, both quantitatively and qualitatively. We analyze, take any recommendations from it, insights plus recommendations, prioritize and balance this. Also looking at the roadmap, for example, if you have an experiment roadmap to see how the new observations fit in, and then again decide and take action from there. Any questions, remarks, or also feedback? I'm very curious also, like any thoughts, feedback on the approach itself. Yeah.
I could come maybe. Thank you for presenting this. Super interesting, and I think this is definitely the direction we're going. I had a little follow-up questions on whether do you utilize any Amplitude agents or do you exclusively rely on Amplitude MCP in this context? And where I'm coming from is essentially because I've realized that you're building your brain directly inside of GitHub, so interacting through Cloud Code. But is there a way also of storing the analysis, the results, and everything, and feed it back into Amplitude for the agents to also act on it?
Yeah, great question. Couple things there. On the one side, what we're doing is we have dashboard agents. So dashboard agents for our overall KPIs. We have like two main dashboards with our most important KPIs. So we have agents running for that. So we get a weekly report on that. I file that report. On the one side, it goes into, it's a bit of a workaround. I could probably make this a bit cleaner, but it goes into Slack. So we have a Slack report, and then from Slack it goes to Claude, and Claude brings it to GitHub. So that's kind of the key observations that go together. We have the same for session replay. So there's a session replay agent doing the same motion. That's kind of the core workflow. We currently have Amplitude AI context as a static entry in Amplitude. That would be definitely something to close the loop further. It would be revisiting that context regularly. So that is something where we have to keep an eye on that it's not static. I think another one here with another, not necessarily, well, it is kind of an agent, like the side of Slack, like that we have Amplitude directly in Slack that we can ask it questions in Slack. So that helps kind of in the collaboration side. Something I have not yet done, surprisingly, is like Amplitude also has a MCP directly to Claude. So you could actually also have an agent where you can say, for the weekly observations, pull Amplitude data directly, and whatever that purpose might be to use it then further. So that could definitely also be an angle.
Hey, Gregor, question from Marion. We also use Claude Code and it's very powerful, especially when we use the Amplitude MCP. How long did it take you in total to get to a process that works properly? Specifically, how long did it take to verify that your agents weren't hallucinating when they interpreted the data?
Yeah, more time than I would be comfortable to admit. So there's definitely a learning curve, at least for the complete setup. Um, I think for for Amplitude specifically, I saw it hallucinate more last year. It wasn't the MCP yet, but it was like the agents within, or like not even agents, the Amplitude AI. So it would be kind of connecting things that were actually not like, for example, it would say like, hey, analyze this funnel, and then it says, yeah, by the way, this experiment was really good that you ran there, and then the product team was saying like, we didn't actually run an experiment there, things like that. um, I think particularly on the MCP, and then yeah, for me, I don't have it connected yet directly with Cloud Code, actually with Amplitude directly. So what I'm currently using is I have um, the exports, or like the insights coming from the dashboard agent to Claude, and then Claude works with those specifically. Yeah. Can you share any particular hallucination cases that you had? Maybe we can narrow it down further from there.
Hello, well, in fact, I don't have anything in mind just now, but sometimes we don't, for example, Claude Code doesn't have enough context to understand everything. So it's to have a good balance between too much context and not enough to interpret. And I think it's not always that easy to have the good amount.
Yeah. What might be something to look into is, it doesn't have to be GitHub, but like that you have some form where you have a persistent memory of the things you have asked in the past, and also where you have given feedback on that this is not the case, so or it is the case. So that is something that helped from my side a lot, in working more effectively and more precise, and having more relevant recommendations from Claude in this case, and that would be then using Amplitude data together. Yeah, but definitely also something to balance out, to not have an information overkill, and so definitely to have context that is relevant for the question at hand, and the use cases you have as well. Something I found quite helpful in Amplitude is to give it context, who is working with it. So if you have, for example, a project that is only for marketing teams, probably good to mention that, because it kind of adapts the language. So these kind of contexts are also relevant.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Then I think we can jump over, as he's saying, you have dialed in. That's great. Then I'll pass the screen to you, and we will be looking at some kind of more concrete day-to-day cases on experimentation, and how this feeds into the overall way of thinking.
Yep. Thank you, Gregor. I hope you can hear me and everybody on the call. Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. So I think we're going to switch gears now, and we're going to do a quick deep dive into experimentation, and the use cases that we have each day when we are working with our clients. So at Adasight, we help clients build a scalable experimentation framework. I'm going to share my screen in a little bit, but I just want to quickly talk about what sort of framework that we use. So it comprises of a three-step process, or a three-phase process. So the first one is the planning and the setup phase. This is where we are using different sort of, you can say, work streams or data sort of points from Amplitude, a lot of other places as well, to generate hypotheses. We're also planning the variants as well in experimentation, trying to see what would our sample size look like, how long are we going to run this experiment, how do we select our primary metric and stuff, and which tool are we going to use in order to run that experiment based on the client that we have, the use case that we have, and stuff like that. In the second phase, I call it the evaluation phase, but it's mostly around interpreting your data results or your experiment results, and trying to decide on a winner. So this is the most critical phase, I would say, in the framework that we use. So a lot of excitement is happening when you are running experiments. So you are probably peeking into results and stuff like that. So you have to make sure that you do not declare a false winner. And we do employ certain AI in evaluating results as well. And the last phase a very good use case for AI as well is the documentation phase, and then deciding on the next hypothesis or the next iteration of the next experiments that you're going to run. So this is where you'll document what you were trying to test, what were the results, and what was your decision, and you have it in the form of a document or a table, and then you can use AI to help you decide the next sort of experiment for your particular use case. Today, I'm going to talk more about how we can generate hypotheses using AI. So we use Amplitude a lot, and there are certain data streams that we can use to generate hypotheses. And then I'm also going to talk about, in order for you to ship fast, how you can use a decision framework in order to decide which hypothesis you should work on. And then how do you need to sort of establish a cadence where you are looking at results at a certain time period, and then you are deciding on the next hypothesis to test in the coming days or weeks or next sprint. So let me just share my screen. I have my talking points here. Yep. But the first question, whenever I'm like working with clients and we have our experimentation package running with them, is that why do we even run experiments, right? So there's a very famous saying that is out there in product teams that your product roadmap is just mere opinions if it's not backed by experiments. So experiments normally or usually add scientific method to opinions, and it reduces the decision risk. So a lot of the times, companies might be rolling out a feature, and then they keep on iterating on that feature, and eventually in 6 months they realize, oh, this is not something that the customers want, and eventually our conversion rate went down. So with experimentation, you reduce the decision risk in the long run. It also replaces the hypoculture. So the person who is the head of the product or the CEO, they can share their opinions, and a lot of the times what I've seen is that companies start developing that feature, there's an engineering cost on it, and then again in the future they'll say this is the feature that the customers might not have wanted. It also helps with compounded learning. So documentation is going to be very important. So you are seeing your results, you are building hypotheses based on that, and eventually you start learning around your user behaviors, what works for your customers, what doesn't work, what works in your market, and you have it in the form of a document. And then it also aligns teams on metrics. So are we optimizing for the conversion rate? Which part of the funnel are we optimizing for? So your product team, your tech team, your business teams, all of them are aligned. That's why experimentation is very important. So for you to ship fast, know why experimentation is important, know how you can implement it in your organization. And as the framework that I talked about, this three-step framework or a three-phase process that I talked about, have it established. The next thing that I'm going to talk about and talk about the use cases that we have with AI is building a hypothesis. So hypothesis can be built from four main, I would say, data streams. So the first one is data analytics. So as I think Gregor might have mentioned before, that you might be looking at a lot of funnels, might be looking at a lot of charts. And in Amplitude, you can just use a dashboard agent. And then you can ask, why is there a big drop off in this particular funnel? And you can probably build a hypothesis based on that. And Amplitude can help you with that. There are a lot of other tools out there as well where you can share data. So I've also like shared direct CSVs with Claude and also with ChatGPT as well, and it will generate hypotheses based on the data that I've shared with AI. The second one is like the most important one, and I think it has recently come into trend as new developments are happening in the AI space, so session replays and heat maps. So if you use the agents in Amplitude of session replays, then it'll identify the friction points for you, the UX problem, the UI problems, and then you can use that to generate a hypothesis. Again, feeds to your AI table or your hypothesis table that you are maintaining. And this is where your UI UX improvements are going to come in. Customer feedback is the most important one, in my opinion. This is where you can plug in maybe your Reddit or any other customer feedback tool with Amplitude or any other tool. And then based on that, you can generate a hypothesis. This is what customers are saying. This is the opinion. Maybe we can test that. Again, goes back into your hypothesis table. The most important part is going to be around the past experiment data. This is where your habit of documenting everything, as we talked about earlier as well, into a very good structured document and then giving AI access to that document is going to help you create further hypotheses as well. So new tests are going to come into your Airtable or maybe in your, I would say, a table for hypothesis. Then you have past data for the experiments that you have done. And in combination of these two, you can generate further hypotheses. So we have seen people also train their own sort of agents and skills, as we were talking about it earlier as well, on Claude to generate hypotheses based on past experiment data. And this is something that we also use a lot because based on this, we start iterating in the right direction. So we have the data from our past experiments. We are also creating new hypotheses. So a lot of hypotheses are coming in. Now we know what are the most important experiments that worked for us previously, the ones with the most uplift, and then we can use this to start working in a direction where it's iterative and we are building on the hypothesis or the experiments that we have already done. The prioritization framework is going to be very important because you need to ship fast. You need to do a lot of experiments at a single point in time. There are a lot of frameworks out there. I commonly use ICE, but there are also frameworks like RISE, PXL. You guys might be very familiar with them. But have these frameworks in your hypothesis table, have these, as we call them, letters in your hypothesis table, in your Airtable, and then you are going to have AI reading into that table. And then whenever your cadence comes in, where you're deciding for your next experiments, you can quickly do a prompt and say, what's the most important experiment that we're going to do? So you can score it yourself as well, and maybe have 3 more columns in terms of the ICE framework, where you let AI score them as well, and then eventually decide yourself as well, and then also let AI decide as well. This is where hallucination might not happen, and this is how you put in a guardrail so that AI might want you to iterate in a direction that is not even present out there, but eventually you have a human guardrail in there so that you are iterating in the right direction. The review cadence. So normally what we do is that we look at experiments each day. I'm guilty of that. But we have sequential testing enabled, which is like sort of a tactic against the peaking problem. And we do not let the clients know whatever is happening. So we let the experiments run for their whole sample size. We have a weekly health checkup. So we look at the Gardner metrics. We look at the primary metrics. We also have AI access to it. Let's say if we are using some MCP of Amplitude inside Claude, then we can look into it. And then we sort of take a decision, but the decision is mostly based on when we have reached the sample size. So normally, like in a lot of sort of experimentation programs, the cycle is set after first 2 experiments, 3 experiments. So you'll know that you'll probably reach your sample size in 2 weeks duration. So I have this cadence with my clients where we plan the experiments in the first week's call, and in a couple of weeks, then we look at the results. We decide on the winning variant using all the things that I discussed earlier, and then we ship the variants forward, or we just like kill it and keep the control as it is. The monthly reviews are super important. This is something where we employ AI a lot. So I have given Claude access to the documentation that I do and the tables that I have. And then I ask Claude to sort of generate the total revenue uplift that we had for that particular month. That's very important for the leadership to know. That's very important for your product managers to know, for your engineering team to know as well. But it's also very important to know what we did not ship, right? So that also is a cost that does not directly reflect in revenue, but the cost is out there, which you just saved with experimentation. So this is how you will use this like a small framework to run experiments at scale. You can ship faster with it. start reviewing results every 2 weeks or as per your cadence. Have a weekly checkup, health checkup, looking at your guardrail metrics, looking at your primary metrics, and then, of course, like if something is too much out there, maybe you can then pause it. And very, very important for you to do a monthly cadence, and do documentation very well in a structured manner. Decide the structure to begin with, keep on improving it, and eventually settle on a structure for documentation, and then you can train a skill on it in Claude, or maybe you can directly connect it with Claude, and then you can build on top of it. Yeah. So any questions on this? Would love to answer.
So thank you for this, first of all. Super cool. I was actually wondering whether you consider or have you tried using like the actual like company, like a global context, that even has some kind of a strategy deck, and the overall direction of a company for the purpose of prioritization as well.
We
We
do.
haven't done
Oh, yeah, go ahead
that
and
yet
say.
at Yeah, so we haven't done that yet, particularly with our clients at Adasight, but generally we can do that. So let's say you have those decks, and you have the business metrics that you want to optimize. You can probably couple it up with the data that you're seeing either in Amplitude. Then you can use Claude or ChatGPT to generate hypotheses with that. I think Gregor was also like referring to how it can be utilized generally.
Cool. Very cool.
Uh,
Uh, and
uh, Yeah, maybe just from my side, it's one of the reasons, or the primary reason actually, why we're not doing that yet for clients is because we don't want to share things that they might not be comfortable with AI. In our case, with Adasight, we do have it. So we have our annual strategy, our OKRs, our revenue goals, and everything in that GitHub repository that I mentioned. And I find it quite helpful, or like the results have improved a lot since it's there. So I think if the organization is comfortable with it, maybe also just to be clear with leadership, what maybe if they're comfortable with the overall strategy, but not with the numbers exactly, the revenue numbers, maybe there are like kind of like where to draw the line can be helpful as well, in getting the benefits, like maybe 80%, while keeping out the sensitive things that organization are not comfortable with.
fair enough. Yeah, I think it's like even to have the direction, because very often, like when we change the project quarter to quarter, we would like double down on a certain area that is like in the strategy deck. So even though that we could have a potential impact somewhere else, it's, let's say, the area that we're already satisfied with, we want to focus on something else. So it could steer the direction. Cool.
Very nice. Cool.
Even
I
though,
think if there's
no, there's
no,
no, I
yes,
have another question though.
please go for it.
It's a little bit, it's also about experimentation in a little bit different context. So considering velocity, right? Everybody talks about the velocity. Let's ship more, let's ship faster. Zain, how do you actually maintain with your clients, or is it also a challenge to have that healthy period of waiting for your data and deciding to ship something else? Or do you see the phenomenon where people keep releasing? It's the cycle is no longer like week or two; it's every day, multiple releases a day. How do we deal with those confounding variables? Because this goes into some kind of a multivariate testing if people do that.
Yep. Yep, I think a very good question, and I think that's one of the pain points that I have. So clients do sort of work at their pace, and they'll be like sort of looking at results. They'll be peeking at results, and they might see some positive results early on, and they might think, "Oh, okay, let's just like ship this variant." So I think that's the first thing that you talked about. So how do we do that? So a lot of the times, whenever we have an engagement with a client, so we put in a lot of effort upfront to train them on what experimentation actually means, right? So we do a lot of workshops where we take them through what sample size is, how you can calculate your sample size, what is your test duration going to look like based on the traffic that you're seeing, what a p-value is going to be, how do we make a decision based on a p-value, the confidence interval that we are seeing. So a lot of effort goes upfront, but still at the end of the day, clients can be impatient, and then they can say, okay, or sprint is currently planned. We have a release to go, and then we would want to ship it. So it's very hard. But what we do at our end is like we make sure that the clients are aware. If they're making this decision with 60% confidence, then it's a decision that might not end up in like a compounding effect or an uplift probably 2 weeks down the line, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing that you talked about, that how do we make sure that a lot of experiments or a lot of products are being, or product features are being released at the same time. So this is where we plan the experiments in a way where we are doing multiple or multivariate testings at one point in time. Also with them, we are doing A/B end tests. At the same time, we might be like doing some other tests as well. So we use the tools where mutually exclusive groups can be created. For instance, with Amplitude, you can do that. So if you have mutually exclusive groups created in Amplitude, then you can run experiments on one group, and then the second experiment on the other group, and the third experiment on the third group as well. So you might have like 3, 4, 5, 6 experiments running at the same time. But all of that typically depends on the traffic that you're going to have. If you do not have a lot of traffic, then it's probably going to take you a year. I'm just like exaggerating, but it might take you a lot of time to sort of come to conclusive results. But I think the good thing is now that a lot of good tools like Amplitude are out there, which help you do that. So I have run multiple experiments at the same point in time. I won't like talk about the number of them, but there were like a lot of experiments. There were multivariate experiments as well. I also was running an AI test as well, up the funnel, so that I know what exactly is happening in terms of the setting that I have for the tool. And then I was also running A/B and test as well. So I had like, if I'm not wrong, 4 to 5 variants in a single experiment. But the luxury that I had was that the daily traffic that was coming in was 50,000, right? So I can do all of that. If the traffic is just 2,000 users per day, I'm not sure if I can like run a lot of tests at the same time. Yeah. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? Since we're a small group, we can, if there is anything, you feel free to ask or share. Otherwise, we can also close here.
Zain, Gregor, thank you for doing this. A very quick question on the hypothesis generation bit that you talked about a little while back. A very common conversation these days is around how limited some of the traditional tools of generation of hypotheses are. They're kind of becoming irrelevant to some degree, because with AI, whole models are being reinvented of sorts, and the interface has also shifted in a big way. I mean, from structured data fields, we are moving to a chat interface where there's fluid conversation happening and all of that, right? In your view, how do you think of those pieces which don't necessarily surface as meaningful hypothesis from, say, session replays and NPS scores and so on and so forth? Because remember, those tools are from the previous version of the internet, so to say, right? They're not designed for this new version, and there's kind of a dichotomy at play there.
Yep. So thank you, Nikki, for this question. So you're absolutely right. Whenever we're looking at our A tables and whenever we're looking at our table of hypotheses, there's a lot of garbage there, right? So even if you give a very structured data in the form of a CSV to an AI tool and ask them to find a point of friction or a drop off, they might hallucinate, and they might be talking about a hypothesis that you would want to test that is like totally out of context. This is why you would need to have an evaluation framework in place in your particular table, right? So This is why I said that if you're using the ICE framework for prioritization, you have to do it yourself as well and also with AI as well. But you also have to make sure that you do not put in a lot of garbage inside your hypothesis tables. And I would like strongly recommend always have a human eye in your hypothesis table. So this is why, like, if you start using a lot of these tools where hypothesis is being generated by AI using some orthodox manners of generating hypothesis, you'll see all of them would say it's either in beta version, or you'll say, please verify the hypothesis that is being generated. Amplitude's own experiment hypothesis or experiment recommendation agent is also in beta as of now. That's why a lot of constant feedback is also going in to these tools where they can like, improve on it based on the feedback that is coming in from the users who are using these tools to generate hypotheses.
Got it.
Yep, I think at the end of the day, a human needs to be there. The process can be very efficient and it can like amplify what you are doing. And for experimentation, that's the case that it can amplify everything. Documentation, for instance, evaluation of results, for instance, hypothesis generation, for instance. But it's going to be your weekly cadence or your bi-weekly cadence where you would be sitting with your product managers, with your tech team to decide on the impact. Maybe the impact can come from AI that might be very accurate. The confidence is something that might be coming from you, right? And I would strongly recommend that you fill that column. And the effort is also going to be coming from your tech team as well. So I think this puts in a very good guardrail in it, and unless we probably reached to a point, I think that might be very soon as well, where you're just like running a website or an app, and a lot of hypotheses is like automatically being generated just in context and how users are using it based on the feedback, based on how they're interacting with the application, rage clicks, drop of points, empty spaces, stuff like that.
Very cool. Then I think we can close it here. Thanks a lot for, on the one side, for joining, and also all the great questions. Was a lot of fun, and also for us, it's always nice to get an outside perspective on the materials and get feedback and discuss it together. So that's really appreciate that. For any topics, we have this on. Finn, correct me if I'm wrong. We're doing it monthly, right? That's our cadence for webinars.
Yes,
If there
sir.
is perfect. So if there are topics you want to explore more, do let us know. Very open for that. And yeah, thanks again. And yeah, wish you a great rest of the week and hopefully see you in the next session.